And for those not familiar with the Product Stewardship Institute, or PSI, we are a policy advocate and consulting nonprofit that ensures that products are responsibly managed from design to end of life. Now, our members include state, local, and tribal governments in 48 states, and we have over 120 partners from businesses, academic institutions, environmental nonprofits, and international governments. Excuse me one second. Okay. So we've worked over the past 21 years to develop EPR policies and programs for over 25 consumer products, and our models have helped enact 127 EPR laws in 33 states on 16 product categories, including packaging. So listed here are just a few of those on which we work. Now, in the US, on the next slide here, there are 2 packaging EPR laws that have passed in 2021, our first ones. So we've entered all those who have had packaging EPR laws. Ours passed in Maine and Oregon, and a third one was enacted into law just this year in Colorado. But this year we saw 22 packaging EPR bills were introduced in 15 states, and most of them were based on, at least in part, on PSI's packaging EPR model that we developed about 4 years ago. And EPR, as you see here, has also been introduced at the federal level. Now, of course, packaging EPR has been in operation for up to 35 years all across Europe, Asia, and Canada. And EPR for packaging is widely acknowledged to result in lots of benefits. And here's, all the benefits that we're very familiar with. But we still keep hearing here in the US, and maybe others of you hear this as well, that packaging EPR does not change packaging design. So that is the question that we're going to be focusing on today. Next slide, please. Does EPR change packaging design? And so this question we're going to look at from 2 different perspectives. One is the current EPR systems. Have they changed packaging design in the companies you're going to be hearing from? And will emerging or future EPR systems further change packaging design, particularly with the eco-modulated fees being required all across Europe in January of 2023? Now, I want to provide a little more context first. We've discussed the question of packaging design with today's speakers in preparation for this webinar, and we've learned a few things. First, whether a company changes its packaging design as a result of EPR depends upon what packaging materials that company uses now. So, for example, if the majority of a company's products are packaged in flexible packaging, they might have little incentive to change, because the benefit for that company of EPR might be that the funding will now become available for the development of new infrastructure to collect and recycle flexible packaging. So that company might not want to switch from flexibles to another material, and they just want to have it recycled. Other companies, however, that use multiple types of packaging might have a different perspective. They might be incentivized to switch their packaging materials because it will cost less under an eco-modulated fee system. Now, eco-modulated fees are intended to drive design changes and material choices. And the main goal of these policies is, of course, to reduce the net environmental impact of packaging. These fees are paid by producers to a producer responsibility organization, not by the consumers themselves. And EPR laws do guide how these fees are to be constructed. Now, the most basic criteria include the weight and type of the material, as well as the cost to manage that material in the recycling system. But there's other criteria you see here that many of you are familiar with. They're promoting environmental attributes, reusability, recyclability, recycled content, reducing toxics, litter, greenhouse gas emissions, and the net life cycle impacts. So in our prep for this webinar with our speakers, they also mentioned several other important drivers. It's not just EPR that we're looking at, but there's other things. For example, material and product bans, post-consumer recycled content requirements, reuse and recycling targets, landfill bans, incineration penalty fees, and public company commitments like those here on the next slide. And you may be familiar, your company may have done these pledges. There's voluntary pledges with the U.S. Plastics Pact, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They've driven companies to set ambitious targets by encouraging these commitments, as well as to support EPR, by the way, and bottle bills. So on our call, we're going to explore what is really driving packaging material choices. Is it EPR policy, complementary policies, public commitment, or all three? And each of the speakers are going to address those aspects and other things. So we're really happy to have these four speakers come here today. Karen van de Stad, Sustainable Packaging Expert from KIDV. Gloria Gabellini, Director of Environmental Policy from PepsiCo. Felix Bizzatti, Global Circular Packaging Director from Mars. And Jürgen Dernheim, the Director of Corporate Packaging Innovation and Sustainability for Procter & Gamble. And as our sponsor and co-creator of this Masterclass series and a very good friend of all of ours here, Joachim Coden will, from EXPRA, Extended Producer Responsibility Alliance, Joachim's going to say a few more words to provide some context. Joachim?
Thank you very much, dear Scott, for the nice introduction, and thanks a lot to the speakers for being available today. Warm welcome to all the audience. I saw several familiar names, so best wishes to all of you. EPR, Design for Recycling, Development of Packaging. I think it is very important to differentiate a bit. Extended producer responsibility, especially the choice, the concrete choice of a packaging, will always stay in the remit of each company. This is the very individual part of producer responsibility to decide which packaging to use exactly, which is the best for the product and the combination. What producer responsibility organizations can do and are doing is to provide companies with the best information about the consequences of their choice in the real life after they have sold the packaging to the consumer. So what will happen to the packaging? Is there a collection system? Are we able to sort it out? Are we able to find a recycler who is using the sorted packaging? This is what the collective part can do, and I'm extremely happy that we have the best in class, I would say, Karen van der Stad from the Netherlands with us, who can demonstrate what an EPR system is able to deliver to support our companies in their discussion and decision which packaging to choose. So a big thanks to our three company representatives for joining us today, for showing, I think, explaining that they are struggling each and every day to find the best possible packaging under so many demands from their marketeers, from their technicians, from the environmental side, from the recycling side. So to offer the optimum in the end for all these various demands. So thanks a lot, and back to the next speaker. I'm sure we will have a very interesting discussion today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Joachim. Appreciate that. And now we're going to hear from our four speakers. And here's the setup for today. Each one's going to speak for about 6 to 7 minutes. And then at the end, we're going to have an extensive question and answer period. So during those presentations, we're going to be compiling questions as they come in and ask them of our speakers at the end during the Q&A portion. And as Julia had instructed you in terms of the Q&A box. So I encourage you to send in your questions as you have them so you don't forget them. And during the Q&A period, I will be joined by Joachim again and Sydney Harris. Sydney's our packaging lead here at PSI and our manager of product stewardship. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first panel speaker, Karen van de Stad from KIDV in the Netherlands. Karen?
Thank you, Scott, for having me, and thank you for the nice introduction, Joachim. I will speak shortly about the system as it is in the Netherlands and try to explain how it works and well, give some examples at the end. Next slide, please. Yes. So my name is Karen van der Stad. I work at the Netherlands Institute for Sustainable Packaging from the beginning. I started this together with our former director, and I'm responsible for all the instruments that we make and well, the content of sustainable packaging. Next slide, please. The mission of KDV is to help reduce the environmental impact of the packaging in the entire value chain, which is to say that we work together with producers, brand owners, retailers, all other parties in the entire value chain. So we try to keep a link between everybody responsible for packaging. We were founded in 2013. We're a not-for-profit organization based in The Hague in the Netherlands. We work mainly for the Netherlands, but we know that our information is also shared in the rest of Europe, and we have a big network there. Well, also thanks to EXPRA. We have a team of 15 experts and supervisory board and a committee of experts that check our work. And we are funded by Afvalfonds Verpakkingen, which I will explain in 2 slides from this. Next slide, please. What do? Well, we build a knowledge base for sustainable packaging. So we try to work with companies and institutes. So the research institutes with experts and universities to make sure that we have enough knowledge. So it's theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge that we try to combine. We give training and workshops for professionals on sustainable packaging. And we give advice and support to companies directly. So companies that have questions on how to go forward. And we have a huge partner network that can help us with that advice and support. We work with a tool which we call Community of Practice, where we combine groups of companies and make sure that a certain topic is, well, explored a little bit deeper. We have 2 running right now: flexible packaging, which has become a working group together with Afvalfonds Verpakkingen, and reusable packaging. And in the Netherlands, an instrument that I wanted to highlight is the sustainability goals for industry sectors. Industry sectors make their own plans, and they are checked by our committee of experts. And those plans contain goals for the coming 4 to 5 years, which is which is one of the incentives, I'll get back to that at the end, or a driver to work on sustainability. Next slide, please. First, a very short overview of the EPR in the Netherlands, which is not representing the complexity of the system, but I try to simplify things. Producers and importers of packed goods pay a fee to Afvalfonds Verpakkingen, which is the EPR responsible organization. And within the group of EPR organizations, or the EPR organization, we have 4 different roles. So we have one system, but we have different roles and different organizations. So Afvalfonds Verpakkingen is the one responsible and well, getting the fees. We as KDV are a knowledge institute, of course, and try to make sure that this knowledge is shared. Netfang is organizing the waste management together with the municipalities and the waste companies. And then we have an organization that is responsible for preventing litter, and that is called Nederlands Schoon, which is not a really easy word in English. So, and of course, there's other people involved. The Ministry of Environment makes the policy, and municipalities have the obligation to collect at households. So that's also why they are involved. And I must say that it's quite unique in Europe, I think, that we have packaging experts and designers in the EPR system. So we have 6 people, including myself, that are used to working with companies like the speakers after me, and have experience in working well within the companies. So it's not only a compliance thing going on, but also trying to actually redesign this packaging. Next slide, please. As said, in the Netherlands, there's a packaging fee being paid per kilo packaging material to afvalfondsverpakkingen. This is only for the bigger companies. So if you have more than 50,000 kilos of packaging on the Dutch market, then you have to pay. Then we have a tool which I have to explain first that for every material, there's a certain fee. So for glass, there's a different fee than for plastics. And for plastics, especially rigid plastic, you can get a discount if your packaging is good recyclable according to our recycle check. So afvalfondsverpakkingen is the one deciding if you get the discount, but we made the recycle check rigid packaging, which is the basis for this discount. So if you follow this guide, this recycle check, then you are able to get this discount. This recycle check is based on the current situation in the Netherlands at sorters and recyclers, but also the collection in the Netherlands. So it answers the question, will my packaging be recycled today? So it's not a future thing, it's just how it is today. So that is a basis and a way of working that we've come up to. This is also under review. We do that to, or Afvalfonds together, Afvalfondsverpakkingen is doing that together with us. I worked out 3 examples on how this can work. Next slide, please. One is that we stimulate design for recycling, as I said before, with a discount fee for good recyclable packaging. Here you see a PET bottle with a small stretch label and a cap of PP. It's the size of the label is good, the closure is good, everything is designed so that it's really good. It's easy to collect, it's sortable, and it is recyclable at the right recycler. Then if you comply to that and there's no glue and other things going wrong, then the fee drops from 70 euro cents to 44 euro cents. So that's one example in stimulating design for recycling. Next one, next slide please, is stimulating reduce, because the fee itself is stimulating reduce. So I always like to mention that. So if you reduce from a tray to a bag, which we've seen in the Netherlands happening quite a lot on this kind of minced meat, the fee stays the same, but the weight is reduced by 70%. So also the fee is reduced by 70%. So there's no change in actual fee, but you pay less because you have less kilos. And another one example that I worked out is on the next slide, and that is stimulating reuse. If you have a one-way bottle, you have a regular fee of, a small amount per kilo. So you see that the glass fee is quite low. And then you have so that's 4.8 cents. And if you have a reusable bottle, the fee is 2 cents per kilo. So I have to say that a reusable bottle is often a little bit heavier than a one-way bottle, but still often it kind of helps. So this is not really a real big stimulation, but it's one of the drivers you can use. And that brings me to the last slide. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. What we see as drivers, incentives to work on design for recycling is a lot of goals in the plastic pact, to be honest. So I made it a little bit like a favorite list from what I hear from companies, but plastic pact is one big driver, and they go on reduce, recyclability, and reuse. So the goals in those plastic pacts are main drivers for retailers and therefore also for other companies. Another big driver that we see and we are being asked about is be able to communicate about the actions taken. So if companies can tell what they have done is, well, they can communicate that on the packaging, that is a driver for marketeers to work on more sustainable steps. Then those sustainability goals for industry sectors are also a driver, because that's within the industry and that's a benchmark with colleague companies. Especially for those companies who didn't sign a plastic pact, that might be a driver. And then, of course, eco-modulation. I'm not sure if it's the biggest driver, because I hear a lot from companies that, well, it doesn't reflect the cost of a project, but at least it's an awareness step, and it works for some companies. We did a review on companies that are using our recycle check, and almost a quarter that responded used actually the recycle check to change their packaging. So it works a bit and it has some influences, but it's not as big as that might be wanted, but it might grow in the future. So this is it for me. I'm curious to the other presentations.
Thanks so much, Karen. It's great to have these very specific examples, and we're getting some great questions coming in already. So we're now going to move to our next speaker, and I'd like to introduce to you Gloria Gabellini from PepsiCo. Gloria?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here. I think Karen gave a very good introduction to what I wanted to talk to you about. And I wanted to start with the first slide by giving you an idea of the packaging sustainability goals that we've set for ourselves as PepsiCo. This is part of a much broader sustainability strategy that has to do with everything we do, from supplying of ingredients, manufacturing, transport, the way we deal with, we interact with our community. So it's a much broader and transformative agenda. So this is a very specific pillar on packaging sustainability, and with reference to what Karen's mentioned, how much goals and commitments are important to set the right way for a company. I think this is where we start. And the first point is design. So maybe Julia, if you want to give a click to highlight how much we start by highlighting and making sure that the design of our packaging is in line with the objective of being recyclable, compostable, and biodegradable. This has been set already a few years back. And then at the end of last year, we also introduced reusability. So now the packaging we do needs to be designed for not only for being recyclable or compostable, but also with reusability in mind, of course, depending also on the type of packaging and on the type of products that it needs to protect. The other very important element is the fact that we are trying to reduce or even reinventing the way we package our products, the way we interact with consumers, the way our products interact with consumers. So we are trying to cut plastic from fossil-based sources with the objective of cutting it by 50% per serving, both in beverages and in food. And this, of course, needs to leverage several solutions. So we really, we need that portfolio of solutions. Of course, we will try to reduce as much as we can. And one of the examples in one picture here that you have is the replacing the plastic wrapping around cans with paper, or even reinventing totally the way we are distributing our products. So if you think about a soda stream or a soda stream professional with the fountains in schools, in colleges, in public spaces, or if you think about a future with more concentrates of powders, which basically result in a packageless solution, there are multiple ways in which we can design products from the start by reducing plastics or even eliminating it. Recycling will remain important, however, and this is something that we need to acknowledge. There are some types of products, and we do have some of them in our portfolio that are particularly sensitive, and that for which we need to optimize the packaging, and recycling will remain one of the ways that we can achieve circularity. So in the next slide, please. Here you had a bit of highlights, but let's go to the next one to talk about EPR. EPR have been and will become, in some geographies where you don't have them yet, instrumental into organizing and making recycling really operational. So we were really happy to work with and be one of the co-author of the CGF paper on EPR design principles, and then to the latest iteration, which is this document on guiding principles for the eco-modulation of EPR fees. I think it's really a reading that I recommend to all of you. It really gives an overview, first of all, of what eco-modulation is, how can it help to design packaging on the basis of eco-modulation again, and what are the principles that we recommend collectively for eco-modulation. I only want to highlight here two of them that I think are particularly important. One is net cost and the other is investments. Net cost is really the fact that the fees need to represent the net cost of the material at the net of sorting and certainly collection and sorting. And most importantly, and so sorry, on the basis of a net cost, you would have a packaging for which there is a very well-established recycling infrastructure, and that whose material is valuable. And here the first example that comes to mind is PET, will have a lower net cost. Whereas a packaging for which there is not yet an established infrastructure, so it's more difficult to, or even sometimes impossible to, to make a profit when selling it, the net cost will be higher. But what is very important is that the investments that come from these eco-modulated fees on the basis of net costs is ring-fenced to develop the infrastructure for the collection, sorting, and then the recycling of this packaging that today may not be easy to recycle, but for which a technology exists, and with the right investments, it can become. So I think I want to really highlight this as key principles for eco-modulation. So just to give you some examples, and Karen anticipated something here. In the next slide, you can see how, for example, eco-modulated EPR fees as determined in certain market the fact that we transition from the iconic green of 7-Up to a transparent bottle for 7-Up. This was driven by, of course, a lower fee, and the fact that transparent PET is much, it's easier, it does not disrupt the recycling operations. I was going to say that this was a relatively low-hanging fruit in the sense that changing the color. Of course, I remember what Joachim said at the beginning, that we need to put together a lot of different interests also within a company. And so I would not tell to one of my marketeers that this was a low-hanging fruit, of course, because changing an iconic color is not so so easy for them for their point of view. But let's say that technically this was something that was at reach, that is relatively easy reach. And something else that we can do, again, going beyond, I also wanted to give you this point of view that we can go, and we want to go beyond recyclability with the next click, is that for beverages, we can think about alternatives to a bottle, either being it a reusable bottle that we are doing, like we are doing in some markets, meaning a traditional refillable bottles, but also again providing consumers with solution for refill at home, like SodaStream, or refill on the go, like SodaStream Professional. So there are multiple product solutions for beverages. Where it becomes more difficult is in the next slide, and it's the other part of our portfolio. Excuse me. So our food business, we have Lay's and the Walkers and Frito-Lay, depending on the market. I see the screen looks a bit strange for me. I hope that looks fine for you. This is a sensitive product that requires a serious protection, not only from oxygen and from physical stress, from moisture, but also from UV light. And you don't have many products that require that. And so we have optimized the packaging to make sure that, of course, it protects the products from all these elements and that prevents food waste clearly. And also it's the lightest possible. So not only to pay less of a fee, but also it critically determines less CO2 emissions. So this is of course another element of the sustainability journey that we need to take into account. It's not only about, of course, achieving the best end of life for packaging, but also minimize the impact on climate, so limiting greenhouse gas emissions. But is this recyclable? That's of course the key question. So in the next slide, you can see that how we have started to think about this. And with the next click, you can see the structure that we typically have today. So it's the bag is made of 82% of one polymer, polypropylene. But of course, what is very important is that the quality of the recyclate, so the quality of the output of recycling operation, depends heavily on the material that we use for our design. So we're really trying to design the packaging in a way that is recyclable and also can yield high quality recyclates, high quality materials. So we went into a journey together with other partners and with a platform called CFlex to design packaging in a way that is recyclable and that yields good recyclate. So in the next slide, you can see that we went from 82% to 90% polypropylene. So this is really a PP rich bag now that we are rolling out in Europe, and which maximizes the use of polypropylene. And essentially the only other polymers are used only to glue together the different layers. And in the last slides, you can see what is the final structure of the bag. So it's mostly, as I mentioned, polypropylene, and the other elements are very minimal. And I want to highlight in particular that the metal layer, which is often thought as one of the most problematic, is really, it's the lowest of them all. It's actually vaporized. It means you can actually see through, as thin as it is. If you pointing to the light, you can see through the metal layer. And really, it's essential for that UV protection that I was talking about earlier. So on the basis of CFlex guidelines, CFlex is a platform gathering multi-stakeholder with whom we've been working. So on that basis, we are designing packaging in this way to make it as much as possible compatible with the recycling infrastructure, and most of all, trying to yield the best recyclates possible. Of course, this is a journey. It will take a while. It will take many of us. It will also take critically the development of the infrastructure, which is, of course, and all other chapters, and that we are not the only responsible for that. We need to work with many other partners, and that's what we are trying to do in several ways. And of course, eco-modulation can help us by, for example, favor or establishing a fee for this type of polypropylene-rich material that is more interesting than, for example, any other, let's say, mixed polyolefin or mixed waste, which normally have the highest fee in the fee structure for plastic. So with that, I leave it there, and I look forward to the Q&As. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gloria. Lots of great information there. And I hope that you and other speakers can send us some links that we can share with some of the speakers about CFlex. And you also mentioned the CGF design principles and so forth. So that would be great for us to be able to send out to others. Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker. It's Felix Bizzatti, and Felix is from Mars, and you're going to hear from his perspective. Felix.
Great, thank you so much for the invitation, first of all, and happy to be here and share a little bit more on the context of EPR and how we consider this at Mars. Felix Bizzatti, I'm leading the packaging sustainability agenda for Mars when it comes to the waste management infrastructure. So my team is mainly interested on understanding the local waste management infrastructure, and based on this, we give recommendations to our R&D team on how they can better design the packaging. We help with the claims, and we advocate in collaboration with our public affairs team on how we can improve this local infrastructure. So if we can please go to the next slide. So the next one, please. Perfect, thanks. So when we talk about circularity, there are two conditions that we need in place. The first one is the design. And we talked already about the design, like what we can do as brand owners to improve the design of our packaging. The design, I would say, it's quite the easy task on it, because the design of a packaging, it really depends on us as brand owners. We decide what type of packaging we put in the market, what type of combination of material. Is it green or transparent, as Gloria mentioned? And in a way, we have a full control. The challenge comes when it comes to the infrastructure. This being a reuse or a recycling or a composting infrastructure, where now that we have designed this packaging and we have placed it in the market, we'll need to collect it, to sort it in the case when we talk about plastic packaging, and recycle it as such. When I'm saying it is a challenge because there are different stakeholders involved. When it comes to the recycling infrastructure as such, the citizens, they will need to play a role by throwing the packaging in the right bin. Usually, the municipalities will take care of the collection and sorting. And then there is the recycling industry as such that will transform the collected and sorted material to something new. Because the recycling is not a profitable business as such, it needs to be subsidized. And as we heard in Europe and in other regions, the EPR schemes, they were developed to subsidize and support this recycling. So usually, I'm saying usually, EPR fees are subsidizing the collection and sorting. So basically the way that it's working in Europe, we pay the municipalities to put the bins in place so that they can collect and sort the packaging. So when it arrives to the recyclers, they can recycle it at a cost that once they sell it in the market can be attractive. As brand owners, I mentioned that we have the full control of the design, but we also have an influence when it comes to the infrastructure. So we don't have a full control, but we have an influence. We have an influence through the EPR fees that we pay because we subsidize as such and directly this infrastructure. And we also have an influence when it comes to the recycling industry as such, because the more we use recycled material, the more we create a demand and the less waste outside there. So that's why a few of us already, we have committed to use recycled material. In the case of Mars, we have committed to use 30% of recycled material by 2025. So if we can go please to the next slide. So when I was talking about this infrastructure, we want to see several things in place when it comes to this infrastructure. I'm calling here the North Star. So first of all, we want an infrastructure that it's working and an infrastructure that it's preventing leakage. So we don't want packaging to end up in the environment as such. Unfortunately, it's not the case in every part of the world. There are regions today where waste are not properly managed. The second point is about the collection and what we call the selective collection. So how we can collect all type of packaging and not being selective for recycling. Usually, we have learned that if paper and glass are separately collected, we can have a better quality and efficiency for all type of packaging materials, including plastic packaging, but also paper and glass. We need the sorting centers to deal with every type of packaging and not being selective to rigids, for example. It's what we see a lot in the US. We want this recycling to happen and be open, I would say, to all type of technologies and not be restricted to mechanical recycling, but also see in place the chemical and advanced recycling. We need all type of technologies to increase the recycling rates. And the fifth part of it, we talk about EPR, is the financing. We need to finance this infrastructure. And here where the EPRs comes into play. So if we can please go to the next slide. So why do we need EPRs to start with? The cost of collection, so what I was saying, the cost of collection and sorting is much higher than the revenue that the material can bring. So if we typically consider that this cost of collection is 100%, usually the revenue that the materials they will bring once they are sold in the market is around 25%. So there is a remaining 75%, this gap of 75%, that someone needs to take into account. And here is the role of the brand owners that we play. We are covering this gap of 75% through the EPR fees. When we look at this graph, there are two important points to consider when we design an EPR fee. The first one is about the cost as such, this 100%. Is this cost 100%? Can it be lower? Can it be 50%? Or it might need to be 150%? So it's all about this cost that is needed, and it's the cost of the trucks that we need, is the cost of the bins, is the cost that we need to put on the sorting center. So what is the right cost and what is the fair cost to pay for this infrastructure to be in place? The second big challenge is about how we distribute this 75% about the brand owners, among the brand owners. We as Mars, we have a different packaging portfolio than PepsiCo and a different packaging portfolio than P&G. So how we distribute this cost, this gap among us in a fair way. And so far, if we can please go to the next slide. So far, they have been, I mean, they are two school of thoughts, I would say. The historical one, and here in this graph, I'm showing the EPR fees in Portugal for different types of packaging and the ones for Belgium. So the light blue will be Portugal and the dark blue will be Belgium. The historical one, it's what I would call the solidarity approach that is still, for example, in Belgium, where we pay an average EPR fee, no matter, I would say, the materials. For example, in Portugal, we don't make a distinction between different types of plastics. If you are flexible or rigid, you pay around 200 euros per ton. So this is what I would call the solidarity approach. We don't make a distinction. We separate the cost among the brand owners. Are all type of packaging recycled? This is still an open question. Usually with this solidarity approach, we recycle the easy, I would say, recyclable packaging, the ones that they have the less cost in order to achieve the targets. A different approach is the one that Belgium is putting in place since few years now, and it's based on this net cost approach. Gloria also mentioned it. The net cost approach is based on the net cost as such of how much is costing this collection and sorting minus the revenue that the packaging format can bring. And as you can see here, a flexible packaging will have a higher EPR fee compared to a rigid, because the cost of collection and sorting of flexible packaging is higher than the one of rigid. And this is, if we can please go to the next slide, and this is illustrated in the next slide here. So for example, a rigid polypropylene packaging, it has around 600 to 800 euros cost to be collected and sorted, and can bring a revenue of 200 to 300 euros per ton. So once this packaging is collected and we can sell the bales of those collected material, sorted material in the market, we can get 200 to 300 euros per ton. In a case of flexible packaging, the cost is a little bit higher, can be between 600 to 1,000 euros per ton. And the revenue as such today, it's more complicated. Usually for flexible packaging, we will need to pay the recyclers so that they can recycle this type of packaging. So as you can see here, the net cost of a rigid, for example, polypropylene packaging will be lower because the system is getting the revenue compared to a flexible. And this is an important takeaway because it's changing a little bit the status quo of what we have seen for many years in Europe, and going on this net cost approach. So each type of packaging is paying a fair price, but this is also helpful for companies that they also have a lot of flexible packaging in portfolio, such as Mars, because by the moment that we are going to pay this fair price, we do not only have obligations anymore, but we also have the right to ask, for example, Belgium, to invest this money that is collected for the higher EPR fees that we pay for flexibles to be invested to develop the collection and sorting of flexible packaging. So it's not only about obligations, but also gives us the right to ask more investments for the type of packaging that we are paying higher EPR fees. So, and if we can please go to the next slide. So far I was talking about the infrastructure price, that how we can adapt it and how we can have this infrastructure cost in accordance to the type of packaging format that we introduce in the market. And as I was saying, different packaging formats, they have different infrastructure costs as such, but where the eco-modulation can also play a role is on the design piece. And again, here, I'm using the Belgium example. In Belgium, depending on the materials that you are going to use to make a flexible packaging, you will pay different fees. A monopolyethylene flexible packaging will pay around 1,160 euros per ton. If the same pouch was made with monopolypropylene, will pay around 1,450 euros per ton. If it was made with multi-material, so PP and PET, for example, or nylon, then you will be penalized because this type of multi-material structure is more complicated to recycle and usually is just sent to incineration. And in the case that you have a multi-layer plastic pouch, and on the top of this, we add an aluminum layer, then here you pay almost 3,000 euros per ton because this type of structure is considered obstructive to the whole sorting process. So this is all about the eco-modulation, and obviously, as I was saying, Gloria illustrated quite well, but with the chips pouch. At Mars, we have also similar approach. So we are looking to transform our portfolio and go to monomaterial packaging. It is not about the fees as such, but is about doing the right thing and increasing the chances of our packaging to be captured by the system and be better recycled. So I will pause here and looking forward to the questions.
Great, thank you, Felix, giving us even more to think about, and the questions keep pouring in here. So I look forward to getting to that Q&A period. Thank you, and we'll now go to our last speaker on the panel, and that will be Jürgen Dernheim from Procter & Gamble. Jürgen?
Yeah, hello. So I hope everybody can hear me, and I would like that you're trying to keep me probably with my head somewhere that's visible, because I will show you something on a later stage. Okay, please to the next slide. I will give you something like an update what one of the big brand owners, being not in the food area active like Procter & Gamble, is. What do we think about EPR, in particular in the European Union in summer, not 2021, it's summer 2022. So apologize, I made that wrong. My function is a director of sustainability and innovation. And why is that linked together? Because really breakthrough and changes in terms of sustainability requires innovation. Otherwise, we will remain on the level of improvement, yeah, but improvement is not the same quality like doing things really fundamentally different. So from that point of view, I would start with a statement to say sustainability starts in our heads. So sustainability is not only a technical subject, and therefore I would give you something like an exercise going through a product where probably you later on may rethink how can you adapt the learnings out of that to your business. So please to the next slide. It looks quite simple, yeah? So this is one of our big brands, it's Pampers. Pampers as a diaper usually is produced and packed in an LDPE bag. And sustainability quite often is not so attractive for people outside the R&D community. But it came into focus of our finance people as soon as you have to pay something for that. And I also give you, in terms of confidentiality, of course, it's anonymized here, something like a comparison only to give you the factors of exactly the same packaging. We are selling these Pampers across Europe. So you could see it spans from 0.5 to 6.5 for exactly the same packaging. The only difference you could see there is probably the artwork, and not everything could run under the multi-language clusters. So therefore, material is identical, the weight is identical, so no difference. So some of the people would think about, what can we do and why is it like that? So because the countries are using EPR tools, as some of the speakers already said, they use it as a tool. So they use it as a tool probably sometimes to make a net cost assumption or a net cost calculation for the infrastructure. Others are doing that because they think they need to do something. Some others are really, really hesitant to say, okay, we could make a little with that. But at the end of the day, EPR fee decisions are done from national governments. So national governments are driving their individual ambitions, and sometimes in the background it stays something like a vision for how to develop industry, how to change something to the better in a different way. But for us as a consumer, it's more in that way that we have to take it like it is. So you could spend a lot of energy to discuss with the individual EPR fee systems of each country. But in our case, for instance, we would have 26 plus 3 different national governments across Europe. So you do not have so many people to do that on that level. So therefore, it's more the question, how can we live with that EPR fee, and where could we probably influence and stimulate EPR systems in countries where they really are more meaningful than others? So to stay like it was in the past is the EPR fee mainly was, as the other speakers already said, it was mainly driven by the weight of a material. And the key optimization option you have is reduce material. If it's less weight, then your EPR fee will go down. But now, and go to the next slide, some of the things has changed already, because the new word is about the eco-modulation, and mainly that means how good is something recyclable. So meanwhile, we have something like the recyclability aspect brought into our material and packaging assessments, where we would say, okay, how good is it in terms of recyclability in a country? And I will give you here, without pointing out the specific countries, if you see, if it's a minus, then it will have a negative impact if your recyclability is low. If your recyclability is good, then of course you have other countries where you have a positive aspect, yeah, here signed by a plus. In other countries, it doesn't matter if it's recyclable or not, it's simply by weight, like in the past, so therefore it doesn't matter whatever you do. But this has already an influence, like Felix already has shown, yeah. The optimization suddenly becomes a little broader, not only reducing wall thickness, yeah. Suddenly you could change your material from a multi-material to a monomaterial. In that case, of course, it was highly attractive to go under all circumstances from a Pampers packaging of multi-material layers to a single material layer only, yeah. So that means in some of the countries, a poor recycled pack has a malus. That means we have to pay more than even sometimes already high EPR fees. And in some of the other countries where have a good recyclability, you could receive a bonus. That means it's a reduction. one of the learnings for our company, for our general managers was, okay, if we have to pay more for a poor recyclable pack and we could save some money with a good recyclable, we automatically bring the burden of the cost into our product sectors inside of our company. So the general managers have decided then, of course, if you have, as probably I picked out by accident, I pick in oral care, if you have a poor recyclable toothpaste tube like we've had years ago, yeah, these guys will have an internal financial burden versus others who have an excellent recycled material. So therefore, it was a stimulus already inside of the company that R&D communities inside of Procter & Gamble were suddenly putting more headcount behind that to optimize the packaging for these unrecyclable version into a recyclable version. And believe me, this is hard work because in many cases you have done it over decades, but after decades, probably it's time to rethink completely. Please go to the next and last slide. More is coming on the horizon. So we have already seen, and the first countries have introduced that already, there's something like a plastic tax coming. And in that case, you could see now two new aspects which are adding to your EPR fees. It's not only the recyclability you've seen on the slide before. Now suddenly the use of PCR, that means post-consumer recycled plastic, may come into the game as well. And you could see if you are not using PCR, suddenly you have another burden here indicated by a minus. The zero means no positive effect if you're using PCR, so it remains like it is before. Yeah, so, and you could rethink the slide before. In some of the countries, if you're not well recyclable, then it doesn't matter if you put PCR into that, so you could not win. What is now coming new in the first countries is if you have a plastic tax, you may compensate that by using recycled material, or you are completely, and you see that at the bottom, you could completely change your material. And all of you who could see my face now, I will present to you one of the options we have already executed. You see here in my left hand, you see an always, it's a femcare material, yeah, in an LDPE plastic bag. And the new version we brought onto the market made out of different materials. And that innovation has changed suddenly so fundamentally that we are not any longer calculated as plastic EPR fees. Now we are running under paper EPR fees, and that's the root cause for many of us in the big companies to rethink how do we get out of plastic and start the calculation of EPR fees by simply changing the material. And as Felix and was said before, sometimes we need barriers. So therefore, of course, it's a challenge, but innovation always starts with a challenge. So therefore, we are having now to introduce paper, which behaves to a certain extent, not identical, to a certain extent with a barrier which is close to plastic. But this is now the breakthrough. And my bet for the future is EPR fees will be becoming more and more expensive, even in the countries where the EPR fees are quite low, because at the end of the day, if you take a look how contaminated or polluted many areas of the world are, cleanup will cost millions or billions of euros or dollars. And all what the human being have been messed up in landfills or in other areas needs to clean up. That will cost money. So if we think broad, then we need to innovate not only in terms of material, but in terms of costs, and to bring the costs to the right source as well. So this was from my side. I'm quite curious to hear the questions now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jürgen. And you see you're getting lots of love here when you talk about going from plastic to paper. So the hearts are floating. So I'm going to now invite Sydney Harris, as you see here on the slide, our policy and programs manager from PSI, our packaging lead, as well as Joachim, and to join me here. And there's been a lot of great questions in the Q&A box, and please keep sending them there. So without further ado, I'm going to just ask the speakers here to come back on and show your pictures, all of you, so everyone can see you. Great. Thank you. Excellent. All right. So let me ask Joachim, do you want to kick us off here with a question? And then I'm going to go to Sydney because you probably have been thinking of great questions.
Yes, thank you very much. I think a question from the beginning, which I saw several times and which I think is very important for the whole discussion. So it goes first to Karen. How do you determine the term recyclability? Because that was a question quite often. And of course, this is important for all the companies as well to understand how this is evaluated or fixed.
Yes, and that's also the most complex question, I think.
Yeah, of course.
How do you evaluate the recyclability? Well, what we did is say recyclability consists of a few steps that has to be there. So first we say it has to be collected, then it has to be sorted, then it has to be recycled, and it has to have a purpose. We looked at a lot of definitions that are around to do that, and we went closely to Recyclass and the EPR, if I say it correctly, and took their definition. But then you have a definition, but then you have to work on actual packaging and make sure that it's that you judge it right. So what we say is that for a packaging, a general packaging, we have something we call, and I try to translate that as good as I can in English, but a throwaway unit. So if you have a packaging which consists of several aspects, you often open it and then throw away it in two pieces. But this, in this case, oh, you can't see it. I thought so. So I'll hold this.
If you hold it, Karen, if you hold it still, we might be able to see it. Yes.
Yeah, I had a transparent bottle, but I thought already that that wouldn't work. But if you have a bottle, this is one throwaway unit. If you have a cup, well, I try to keep it still, with a lid, that might be two throwaway units. So we try to determine what does the consumer do at first. And then we look at the throwaway unit, including labels, glue, all aspects that end up in that entire chain of action. So the sorting is, of course, very important. Is it sorted in the right way? And then at the recycler, does it not give any trouble? So that's how we do that. We do that together with the with the brand owners, the producers, but also with the sorters and recyclers.
Yeah.
So we try to combine.
So
them.
it is not an academic exercise where a company can buy a certificate from one professor who was able to do it in his lab. It's a it's a benchmark of the reality, and there you work with the existing sorters and the existing recyclers. So and I think this is the trend, and this we will see as a new definition all over Europe as well. And that makes it more realistic in the future, but even more difficult, because what is recyclable then in the Netherlands might not be recyclable in Greece, where Felix is living. Not at the moment, but you see the potential. Scott, back to you.
So let me just, because we have limited time, I'm going to go to, we have lots of great questions here, and I obviously we need another webinar on this, so probably 10. Sydney, question.
Yes, we had so many questions. I'm going to try to combine some of them into like one Frankenstein question. So everyone in the audience, hopefully I'm partially addressing your questions, but we got a lot of interest and curiosity, kind of jumping off of Joachim's question about how you determine recyclability, but also interest in more upstream, how those factors and eco-modulation and other factors really influence design, and like what is the tipping point for when design change happens. So I'm going to try to, here I go, I'm going to try to combine this into one question. As a company, or Karen, in your case, as a center for information, providing information to companies, how do you determine okay, we want to make our packaging sustainable. Where do you start? How do you determine your goals? How much do eco-modulation fees start to influence those goals? You know, Jürgen, you mentioned R&D wasn't maybe that interested in sustainability until we had to pay something for it. And now we have to pay a fee, but it's different everywhere. How do you start factoring that in? And how do you weigh, this is where it gets hard, how do you weigh like the life cycle assessment results of something and looking at like the carbon footprint versus other factors like, is it recyclable or compostable, or does it frequently become litter or marine debris, and does the public hate it? You know, there's all kinds of factors. So how do you kind of put all those together with the eco-modulation fees and start that process of design change?
All right, let's start with Jürgen, you know, in 5 words or less, Jürgen. Let's start with you, go to Felix, and then go to Gloria and Karen. Jürgen?
Yeah. I always ask my R&Ders to say, would you be happy if your packaging would come back to you? Because if it's not recyclable, yeah, then start from scratch. So in some of the cases, it's quite simple, but in particular, as we have known from the very beginning that, for instance, multi-layer materials are almost impossible to recycle or require such a lot of energy, or a highly complex technology, which never pays out on the environmental perspective. Then, of course, we started internal innovation projects to say how to get rid of these nasty materials. So it starts really with a decision-making process. For instance, nothing below 90% recyclability is anymore allowed. So, but this is somebody your top management has made the decision. This is nobody on the floor level can decide. So it really requires top level support, and then give guidance, give a direction. So, and no excuses, because it needs to be done in the right way.
Thank you. Felix?
So in our case, we see the eco-modulation more as an opportunity to pay a fair price, for flexible packaging. That is the majority of our packaging portfolio, and to see the investments in infrastructure there. For many years, we have paid EPR fees, but those fees, they were not going most probably in the development of the infrastructure for flexible packaging. So as such, we see these increased EPR fees that they talk about the net cost to help with the development infrastructure. Now, when it comes to the design, we were not waiting for the EPR fees to take the decisions and to do the right thing. We already have commitments on transforming our packaging portfolio. And on the top of this, especially in Europe, there is also a directive that by 2030, it's calling about the that all companies, they will need to put in the market recyclable packaging by 2030, whatever this definition will be. But there is also legislative part. But as I was saying, we are not waiting for the EPR fees. We are doing the right thing from a design perspective already.
Thank you, Felix. Gloria?
Yeah, so that's lots of questions all at once, in fact. Just let me start. I try to answer them all quickly. How do we set out our strategy? I think, you know, there are multiple factors, but specifically when it comes to sustainable packaging, we often refer to initiatives, platforms that we are part of and that can guide us. So one of them is Ellen MacArthur Foundation, for example. So they started, you know, a few years back, the New Plastics Economy, and they had set these objectives, these global commitments to which we subscribed, and then clearly they become also part of our strategy, like 100% recyclable, compostable, biodegradable, and now also reusable. So reducing plastics, reusing. So that's, you know, we incorporate that, and of course we tailor it also on the basis of our portfolio. And that's the second key questions I think that you asked us, because of course, you know, also as a consumer, I really welcome the changes in materials that P&G is doing, but it's really difficult to put our potato chips into paper. So that's not really, you know, a relatively easy transition, as I tried to explain in my presentation. You know, switching color for a PET bottle is not a technical problem, but putting our chips into paper, we don't have a solution yet, maybe, and very hopefully we will have it soon, but there isn't today. So we need to optimize what we have today. And going to your last question, we need to balance it out with the other environmental impacts. So, you know, a PET bottle weighs 20 grams, you know, roughly a PET flex film bag 4 grams. That means much lower greenhouse gas emissions. If we would switch to a paperboard sort of carton for our chips, it would be much more, much heavier, and that will mean more greenhouse gas emissions. And we also need to achieve our own objective of 40% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 and climate neutrality by 2040. So we cannot really trade off one impact with the other. So it's all of this together that we need to balance out.
Thank you, Gloria. Karen, do you want to answer that question, or do you want to go on to another one?
No, I'll answer it quickly. The strategy part is something that a lot of companies are struggling with, and Ellen MacArthur Foundation and others are giving direction, but to how to implement that themselves, that's quite a difficult one. So bigger companies that are present here, of course, have more manpower to do that, but smaller companies often think that's a difficult part. So that's also why we try to help them with that. And we don't have a one-off solution. So for the one that asked the question, I don't have a strategy that fits everyone. That's a little bit difficult part. I think a valid point is the recyclability versus the environmental impact. What we did is make the Sustainable Packaging Compass. That's a tool where you have a recycle check, an indicator that gives something that says something about circularity. So we try to say how circular your packaging is and the environmental impact. And we developed that tool especially for the conversation between the more technical people and the marketing people, so that they can have a look at those three factors. And we have a list of other factors that we want to add, but at least those three to have the discussion on what is most important. So, and also to give a quick insight on what is changing if you go from transparent to green, what happens in recyclability, not so much on environmental impact, but recyclability changes a lot. Circularity changes a lot as well. So with every example, you can play around and see what's the impact. So I think that's an important one, to have the technical people talk to the marketing people, and also to stimulate and in that way also stimulate innovation, because marketing people have different questions than technical people. So that helps each other. So,
thank you. Great question, Sydney. Okay, Joachim, I want to go back to you to see if you want to follow up with anything or a new question being asked in the Q&A box.
Just for context matters, perhaps very quickly a few sentences to many questions. Incineration does not count as recycling, even with energy recovery. So recycling is mainly mechanical recycling at the moment, even more strict with a new measurement point. Chemical recycling is coming, but we still need a agreed definition and a way of measurement. What is how much of the chemical recycled plastics is allowed to be counted for the targets. Glass has a functioning market in Europe since decades, so we do not have any problems, I would say, in the uptake of glass. And minimum the continent countries in Europe have always tried to have a big share of the material recycled in Europe. And this trend is even more and more. The main challenge of the Chinese sword was for the UK and for Ireland, so not so much for the other countries. Just in short, a lot of questions.
Yeah, great. You hit up a lot of them here. So back to you, Sydney. Anything you would like to pull together here, or what's on the top of your mind?
Well, similar to Joachim's quick points there, we had a number of pretty technical, specific but short questions from the audience that I think we might want to just address very quickly from some of our speakers. So I'll just rattle off a couple one at a time. We can do quick Q&A here. So first, for Pepsi, for you, Gloria, we had a couple of chip bag specific questions. So hopefully these are very quick answers, but just to really clarify here, do MRFs actually accept, or does anybody actually accept the new 90% chip bag that you showed in your slides right now? So is it actually recyclable now, or is it just a step closer to being recyclable ultimately?
Yeah, so this is a change that we are rolling out now, so still coming. It will come in the course of the next months. So there are a couple of state-of-the-art MRFs that will be able to accept it, but they are not many. So this will be a process, right? We are trying to do our part with the design. We, of course, talk, I saw a question about that. We, of course, talk to MRFs, to all the other partners. We are part of this multi-stakeholders platforms. We have constant dialogues. Of course, it will require, a critical mass of this type of material, of PP-rich feedstock, for them to activate the sorting lines or even to build the sorting lines and then to sell them to recyclers. So it's a building up process. But today, we wish it was much more.
Okay. And one more question for you, Gloria, on the chip bag. In the US, the bags are usually metallized for like a little packet of chips. Does Pepsi consider those to be recyclable in the US? You may not know this because that may be your US counterpart, but just we had a question about that.
Yeah, so the structure is similar also here. They are always metallized because of that UV protection. Right. So largely we have two requirements for recyclability is access to collection and then recyclability in practice. So it's not, I don't know specifically to the US, but it's quite a strict definition that we use. So often they are not considered as recyclable because of the lack of infrastructure for collection or recycling.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Felix, a quick question for you. Some of your slides mentioned the direct costs and indirect costs of recycling various materials. And we had a question about whether you could clarify what is an indirect cost. I'm guessing that might be something like education or outreach or labeling. I don't know. What's an indirect cost?
No, you are absolutely right. So it's about the people that they will work on the EPR scheme. So first of all, secondly, a lot of those companies, they have campaigns, especially littering campaigns. So this will be also part of the indirect cost. And yeah, this is in some cases also it's education more broadly. In some cases also might be some R&D projects. So these are the R&D costs. The direct one, it's really the pure operational one, like the bins, the trucks, the sorting centers. So this is the distinction that I'm making there. And it depends. In my case was 70-30, might be in some countries might be 10-90. It really depends.
Sure. Okay. That's great. Thank you so much. And then a question for Karen, but maybe for the rest of you as well, maybe for Joachim, this is good for you, but we'll start with Karen. Why is there a fee charged at all in the Netherlands for reusable packaging? Because, I think the reason we got this question is that in the US, there are a lot of bills and some of the new laws emerging that exempt reusable packaging from the fees to try to provide even more of an incentive for companies to move to reusable. So what's the story there? Why are reusables paying fees?
Because they have to be administrated, and it's just to cover the cost of the administration, which Felix said, the indirect cost. So for people like me, my colleagues at Affonds Verpakkingen, that's why there is a fee. So it's the basic fee, the lowest you can get.
Wonderful, thank you. And Joachim, maybe you can address kind of across Europe, is that the same, or are there different trends in terms of fees for reusable packaging in different countries?
I think the general agreement is that we should re-evaluate much more than in the past when it could make and should make sense to use reusable and refillable systems. So not to concentrate what is the easiest for everyone, but what makes really sense. So I think there is a trend that not only in the beverage sector, but in many sectors, we are re-evaluating how we can reduce one way. We have already several countries where the reuse packaging has to be registered. Normally it is for free. In some other countries, this is a big question mark. How much reuse is there? We know it is an extreme big part in the commercial sector with all the plates and crates and so on. But I think this is what we have to work on in the next years, especially before the Commission would like to set a target. We of course need to know how to measure what is existing and what will be the improvement. But reuse is a big focus of the Commission, of the politicians, and of industry, and we have to get it right, I would say, in the next few years.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
All right, I'm going to ask a question that's come up here a lot in the United States. This is like the big bomb, if you will. Has EPR affected consumer prices for your company's products? And if so, has it been a problem? Let's start with Jürgen.
Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Now, okay, all right, okay. Yes, of course, it's part of our financial calculation, so it's part of our product costs. Therefore, to a certain extent, don't count now how tenths of a cent that is. Yeah, of course, somewhere it will be inside of the cost. So I think whatever is driving cost at the end of the day is appearing on the sales price. Yes, but neglectable, I would say. So not that we are making the consumers afraid, because at the end of the day, yeah, even if you would run, and we have a good exercise where it was calculated, how much would it cost to make a complete circular system? And Joachim probably will know this study from the ACATEC from last year. And there was a calculation made from a lot of good scientists, yeah, and it's in the area of 2 cents per, I think, 2-liter bottle of a detergent. So this is the real cost, how much it would cost to introduce full circularity.
And do consumers see that? Do they experience it? Is it they don't even notice? Is that what you're saying? They barely notice, they don't notice?
In Germany, you pay your black bin. We have a separate system. So that means whatever you put in your commingled bin, you pay. That means your wallet has the burden of your black bin, because all other bins are free. And this is a highly disciplinary.
Okay, great. Gloria, how about for you?
I cannot answer the question in the specifics, honestly. I don't know, I don't have the visibility. I would just like to say in general, this needs to happen. I mean, we need to organize financially collection sorting for sure. So it needs to happen, and the cost needs to be split fairly among of course all the participants in the system, but it needs to happen. So it's something that I see as necessary.
Okay, Felix.
No, as Gloria, I don't have this visibility, and in our case, because we have a lot of flexible packaging, the EPR cost as such, it's not huge as it can be with a Pepsi or a Coke, that they have a lot of rigid packaging in their portfolio. But I agree with Gloria that we need to take the responsibility on the system as such.
Okay, and Karen, anything you can lend on this in terms of your experience?
Well, we had some experience in the Netherlands where there was a packaging tax. So before it was a fee, it was a tax for a short time. And then it was obliged to put it on the tickets that people would get at the end, the cashier. That gave a lot of discussion, of course. But I'm not sure if it gave the awareness that some people hoped it would give, because at the end, you're buying a product, and that product is something you like, you like the taste, you like something about it, and that's why you buy it. And of course, you can have some differences in packaging amongst products that you, well, if you buy chips, you can have a different type or a different kind of bag, but your choices as a consumer are quite limited there. So what can you do with that information? I think that's an important discussion that you should have before you would actually explain that. So it gave a lot of discussion, but not the discussion that consumers can actually change their choices or anything like that. So it was more a principle discussion. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I'm not aware in any country that the inflation rate increased because of introducing
No.
EPR. No, I'm really not aware. There was no riots up to now. And I think it's the logic to make the external end of waste management costs a part of the normal price, like the costs for your stuff, for your material, for your energy. And then it is part of the normal game. How much do you pay to the packaging producer? How much does the retailer pay for your product? So to really say how much of the 100% EPR costs are ending up with the consumer, I think you are not able to do this. And this is the logic behind it. A few percentages might be with the brand owner, with the retailer, and so on. And of course, a big part will be with the consumer. But what is the alternative? The alternative is the local authority one day will have to offer a proper system. I think there is no discussion about it. We cannot just fill all the canyons that we have. At a certain moment in time, we need a proper system, and then the local authorities will have to increase the waste fees to their inhabitants. And I'm sure the local authorities will blame industry dramatically that they are the reason for this increase. So I think the smarter way would be EPR, and to be able to influence minimum a bit how much you pay in the end.
Great. Well, you got a lot of thumbs up and so this is perhaps just something to think about. We need to have companies, the brand companies say that this is the way to go out loud in our forums as much as possible. I know that you're operating in different spheres, but there's been a lot of pushback from those who don't want EPR and saying that consumer prices will go up and that it'll affect those who are disadvantaged more than others. So just sit with that for a bit. I'm going to have to close up here, unfortunately. Wow, what a great panel. Thank you, Jürgen, Karen, Felix, Gloria, Joachim, great comments as usual, and Sydney, awesome way to combine all those questions into synthesizing it. We have more to do. If you can stay with us just for a bit longer here, Julia, last couple of minutes are yours.
Once again, thank you to our panelists. A huge thank you for your presentations, and obviously a huge thank you to our sponsor. And thank you for all of your great questions and your participation today for those of you in the audience. And we hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
And thank you, Julia and Rachel
Bye-bye.
and Amanda. It's been a huge team effort here. All right, to be continued. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.